The Google effect is real. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the focus group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. If you're watching on our video cast today, it is May 15th already. May 15th, John. Can you believe it?
No, I cannot. And May, as you know from the past year, May was a pivotal month last year. It's amazing that a year has passed since all the events that took place in May. But here we are.
I know as we march forward, my little Chihuahua Spike is going to be celebrating his 23rd birthday, June 1st, as we head
I wonder if
toward
you need to
there.
have Guinness in.
Well, there's another dog, surprisingly, and people keep sending it to me. There's another dog named Spike, which is a white Chihuahua, although Spike's almost white because his hair was originally black, but he's all gray. That's 1 year older. His name is Spike. He's in Ohio. He's 24. He'll be 20. He's going to be 24, 25. Spike's 23. Will be 23. So
And how's Spike doing?
he's okay. He still has a great appetite. He still has he still does the zoomies, but his eyes he has glaucoma.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to put him through the surgery, and his hearing's gone. But every once in a while, he still can get feisty and sees what's going on, and is protective of the yard and all the other things. But
And the clan, his little den.
and the clan,
right?
yeah. So he still gets around. God bless him. He can't do the stairs. He's fallen down the stairs a couple times.
Oh.
So he put up a fence so he doesn't, because he wants to come up and back. You know, he wants to go up the steps in the house. And now he's smart enough to know he doesn't try. You know, he learned that himself, that he's probably shouldn't do that, but we put a gate up anyway. And we haven't moved any furniture or anything in the house. So he has a little trail where he follows. He has beds in every room. He's got a bed in the den, a bed in the living room, a bed in the kitchen. He's got beds all over the place. But he's having in his senior years, he seems to be doing okay.
He's been a terrific companion, huh?
Yeah, he's a good little pup.
He's a funny one. I remember whenever we visit, his favorite thing to do is any new body that walks in, if he likes you, he's right up on your lap, and you got to pet.
Got to pet him. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're always very good with him. He liked you. He liked, for some reason, even when he was younger, when we first got him. We got him when he was somewhere between 5 and 7 years old. He liked tall, slender men, skinnier men. In other words, big guys like me he didn't like, but he liked taller, skinny men. So he liked our friend Jeffrey. He liked our friend Rich. Brian and I, not so much. But he liked Matt.
He likes me. Yeah.
He likes you. Yeah. But if you were bigger, he wasn't, not so much. But
there's something I learned, too. Like when Spike would sit on your lap, he would sit with his back facing me, but he'd be looking out. And I have learned since then that dogs do that as a way of saying, this human is mine right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you tried to go near, he wouldn't bite you, but he'd let you know that you stay away. Keep your distance.
Pet.
Yeah, keep your space.
All right, I got two things for you before we roll into the rest of the show. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but we happened upon a documentary about Abba, and it was on the CW11 or something, and I think it was made a few years ago, but several years ago. You know, I forgot how huge they were, but I also forgot that they crossed into a couple different. Like they were doing some of their best music during the time in America when everybody was hating on disco. Right. Remember, they would have these baseball games where people would come and burn records and all that. And then they showed some really cringy interviews that they gave. Not their answers weren't the problem. It was they would be sitting on stage, the two beautiful women and the guys, and they were asked these really bizarre, almost stupid questions about their relationship. And you watch them and you're like, you watch them, the whole band, they're like, do we really have to answer this crap? And they would go along with it. But so what was Arrival or Super Trooper their big breakout in the U.S.?
Oh, I think it was, Arrival.
Arrival sort of put him on the map, but I think Super Trooper was the one that really broke through.
Well, Super Trooper was one of their latest, but I believe it was the very first one that had Waterloo, Dancing Queen, and SOS on it.
Okay.
And I don't know what that was called. I can see it. It folded out. They were dressed almost like gypsies, which again is now politically incorrect. But they were dressed in this kind of 70s kind of gypsy garb almost.
Yeah.
And gosh, at my yard sale, all those albums went away. But
And
but that one had that one. I still remember a friend of ours, my parents' good friends, and they were friends of ours by extension. The daughter Lorraine Smith had this ABBA album. I never heard it before, and she put on SOS, which I was kind of like, because it starts slow. And then I really liked it, and then she played Waterloo, and then she played Dancing Queen, and I forgot all about Olivia Newton-John. I was all about ABBA.
So there was a part of the documentary where they showed when ABBA triumphantly returned to sold-out shows in England. I think they did 6 shows in a row, and as the interview or the voiceover said, they could have done 15 or 20, and everyone would have been sold out.
Wow.
They showed the green room in the back of the stage, and all these different bands came to watch ABBA, and they showed a picture of Pete Townsend from The Who. He's The Who, yeah. Sitting in this chair, and they interview him, and he basically said, he goes, SOS is the most perfect pop song ever written.
Really?
He was like convinced that, and all through this documentary, they would show the band performing, and they would also show, remember those videos where the girls would one would be facing one way, and then they would play the music, and Bob and I were like, there's not one song we don't know. We know almost every song they've done, even the slow ballads and stuff like that. And they are threaded through pop culture. So it's hard for me to imagine that they started, and they were not even that well liked in Sweden when they're Swedish, right?
Swedish, yeah. I used to, and I went to Canada during, I think it was toward the end of, I was either high school or college, but we had stopped in some department store in St. John, New Brunswick. And I walked in, and they had, and I was looking at the records to see what they had in Canada, and they had an ABBA album in Spanish.
Oh, did you buy it?
I bought it, of course. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, this is.
They sang in Spanish?
Yeah, and so you can actually, if you go to Amazon or any of the services that have music now, it's called Abba Oro, O-R-O. And it's all of they had recorded albums or some of their more popular songs in Spanish. And so they even reached, far, far further than just the English language. But I will throw in I'll throw in Dancing Queen or Knowing Me, Knowing You or something in Spanish here at the house. And people be like, oh, and then they hear it and then they realize it's in Spanish, which is.
I am going to totally look that up. And the other thing that I loved about this documentary, which one was the blonde woman? I get their names all
Agnetha?
Yeah.
Or there was Frida and Agnetha or something.
She was extremely unhappy.
Yes.
But the documentary made a point of reasserting this every couple of minutes. She was unhappy for years, but she put that all aside in favor of the band and the band's success.
Weren't they both married and then they swapped partners or something? Did they swap partners or something? And then
one couple got divorced, and then eventually the other couple got divorced. But they stayed together as a band until eventually one of them had a solo career. But, as the guy that narrated the documentary said, he said, how unusual is it that when the interpersonal dynamics of the band exploded or they weren't that good, they all hung together because they had a successful business going. I mean, by the time that the album Arrival arrived, I was stocking Abba Clogs at Marshall's, brand names for less, and then they mentioned Super Trooper and Waterloo. So it was like, it's one of those things we randomly landed on, and I was like, I'm so glad I watched it. I have another.
Was it through a streaming service or?
It was we were just watching Spectrum or our normal cable TV, but I think it was the CW11, like one of those independent channels.
Was it an hour long or longer?
It was about an hour and a half, maybe.
Okay, I'll have to look for it.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, and then when they described their touring schedule and how the girls and they also said something about this band that blew me away. They constantly practiced. practice. They'd show the backstage, the band singing, and if they did this in every single city before they went on stage. They practiced their harmonies, the whole thing. So they were really prepared to go out there and entertain. Just amazing.
You know who else? It's funny you said that. I was watching an interview. It was actually on Howard Stern with Bruce Springsteen, who I've not ever been usually a huge fan of, but it was interesting because he said the same exact thing. He practiced more. He said he was known to practice more than anybody because he wanted to be the best. Yep. And it was practice. It's a great interview, by the way. If anyone likes Springsteen, or you just like to hear about music from the 70s and 80s and how somebody gets to be a huge pop star, it's a great interview, Howard Stern. You can find it on YouTube. You can find the interview. So I interrupted you. What was your other thing?
I was just going to switch off to something different to make you laugh. I came across this thing on Twitter. It was from a reverend. I believe it's Canada. A reverend would be Episcopalian or Protestant because...
It was Protestant, yeah.
Because you can be gay in that church as well. So it's today. He says this: today, a man came into the church to actually demand, what I thought of, quote, gays and trans people. He used a different term. He didn't like what I said and began arguing quite aggressively. I asked him to leave. As he did, one of my church ladies was coming in. Your priest is a heretic, he yelled. She stared at him blankly, then turned to me and said, "What? I thought you were Sagittarius." He left in disgust. She watched him go and said, "God love him. I don't think anyone else could." And he says, "I love my church." I just thought that was a funny little, I thought you were Sagittarius.
I thought you were Sagittarius.
It's from Abba to a reverend in Canada. Your priest is a heretic. I thought you were Sagittarius. Folks, it's a focus group. You never know where we're going to go with things.
There's a crude joke that you said that reminded me of the mislabeling of... I don't know if I should tell it, but it's a crude auto joke about a woman at the grocery store, and she was an older, middle-aged woman, and she fancied the bag boy that was taking the groceries out to the store. Have you ever heard this one?
No.
And so she was trying to come on to the younger guy, and he's carrying her groceries out to the car, and she says to him, "I have an itchy pussy." And he says to her, "Lady, you're going to have to point it out. All these Japanese cars look the same to me." Anyway, crude joke.
Abba, reverend with the thing, and a miscommunication about a possible Japanese car called something vulgar.
I don't know. You could say the word. Trump says it all the time.
He says a lot of things that other people say, and they got slapped down for it. So, who knows?
Yeah, we use that word a lot in the auto industry, but locker room talk, I guess, right? Locker room talk.
Yeah. Boys will be boys.
Yeah. So as our show works here, John and I have our banter in the beginning. Then we both pick an article that caught our eye during the week. We visit with our friends at Deep Discount on occasion. It was one of our partners, which you'll find at our website, focusgroupradio.com. We have a business birthday, which we're the only show that does that now in our 16th year. And then we have a little bit of shop talk where we talk about an article, usually business related or career related. So without further ado, Mr. Nash, what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
Well, the show's really rolling along. You're going to love this one. And I picked this for a very specific reason. This popped up on Queerty. And basically... they were bringing back a time from the 1970s when Liberace guest hosted the Mike Douglas show, and Little Richard was one of the guests. So Little Richard and Liberace, Little Richard apparently at some point did come out. Liberace never did. Many people suspected, a lot of people knew, but... So the thing that I find fascinating about this is...
so delicate.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, two bigger queens you wouldn't find. Even just look at the picture there. He's in a leopard lame-ish kind of thing. And what is Little Richard's
if you saw the clip for real, so I have an audio segment here I'm going to play. It's like a quick 20-minute thing here. This is a clip from this show.
One and only Little Richard. Between you two, I look like I'm leaving for the seminary.
That's wild. I love
Oh, I just
That's
had to. I wasn't
wild.
going to wear this today. And Liberace asked me, so are you going to wear something loud? I said, I got to. I have no other choice.
Have you two ever thought of trading some ideas and
Well,
fashions?
you know, I've been admiring this man all my life from a little kid.
There is more to it, obviously. And the reason I brought this up, so this comes like, this has just showed up on Queer Tea, right? But this clip has been around since the show happened in the 70s. The clip popped up on YouTube about 15 years ago. And it now and then it circulates. But what I'm most intrigued by is the response that it gets now when people hear about it. And what the Queer Tea article did was they pulled a couple of tweets, and people said, someone said 54 years later, everything about this still looks and feels ahead of its time and way more than the sum of its parts, especially a straight male white host having a very flamboyant gay black male guest and cutting him off to call him beautiful. At one point, Mike Douglas says, you're really beautiful, and he says, thank you, with no comedy or overcompensation, just admiration. And then another one was, it deeply touched me that Mike Douglas, in all sincerity, told Little Richard he was a really beautiful in person. I loved watching the Michael Douglas show when I was young. But then you had these other things happening, and then a quote pops up. Somebody says, back when you can be yourself and not force it onto others, and we all just were okay with everyone being themselves. These people existed, but did their thing and never tried to jam it down people's throats for attention or wanted to go after children. Never. So
Go after children.
well, that's the typical thing.
Yeah.
Like, we hear this from a lot of the right-wing pundits, like, gay people have been around, but as long as they kept to themselves, they didn't push it down our throats, whatever. It's just so fascinating to me that this crap comes up, because what's lost on everybody is, in Liberace's case, he was very closeted.
Right.
Many people knew, but they didn't know the whole thing. And navigating your sexuality that way for your whole life, we're one of the highest paid entertainers in Vegas. You can't come out and say something because, it's going to scare the audience. But the reason this really made me laugh so hard is years ago, our friends Pat and Gary.
Right.
Gary's dad and mom drove to their upstate house from Ohio because Gary's dad was going to help them paint the house, the exterior of the house. He brought all this equipment with him, and we went over to visit with them and have a cocktail on their porch and say hello. And his parents were really sweet. And this came up. We were talking about the Michael Douglas show and how Liberace and Little Richard were on at the same time. And Gary's mother, I think, said something to the effect of, it's one of those things where you watch it, and after Little Richard came out, you'd think that Liberace was going home to a family and kids, because Little Richard was even a notch above Liberace. So anyway, if you YouTube Little Richard and Liberace on the Mike Douglas show, you'll get a really interesting clip and a very, very fun look at the 70s, including the fashion. But that was what caught my eye this week.
I think it's so funny that somebody would make the comment that they were not forcing it or shoving it. Of course they were. Look at the outfits. The outfits were outrageous. I mean, Liberace's sitting there in a leopard coat, and Little Richard has got his hair all teased up
like
and
a
makeup
strap,
on.
yeah.
He's got eyeliner. He's wearing a necklace and a kind of a flashy tank top. But what I loved about it is Mike Douglas, and it's what you were saying. They obviously all knew, but they just handled it respectfully, and it was not a big deal. And it's the same thing that we talk about with the Drag Queen Story Hour. If you're going to make an issue out of it, it's going to be an issue. But if you're just going to listen to somebody in a dress and a wig reading a little story to the kids see characters all day long. It's another character.
It's like, here's a little piece about Little Richard. In 1982, he said on the David Letterman show, "God gave me the victory. I'm not gay now, but, I was gay all my life. I believe I was one of the first gay people to come out." In 1984, talking to another journalist, he defined himself as omnisexual. And in 2017, Little Richard denounced homosexuality as unnatural affection. He claimed to no longer be gay because of his faith. He died in 2020, aged 87. I mean, that's the kind of mental gymnastics you had to go through, right? Maybe he truly did decide he wasn't anymore, but I mean, you watch some of these clips, you're like, I don't know how you could pray that away.
Well, it's funny you show that picture. There's a meme. You might have seen it. It's Howard Cosell, and he's standing with O.J. Simpson and Bruce Jenner.
Oh God.
So he was one of those like stars. They would
ABC,
do those.
ABC used to do those like star Olympic things, or
Like
star,
the field day for the stars or
yeah.
something. But anyway, this Howard Cosell, and he's got O.J. Simpson on one side and one team, and Bruce Jenner and his right out of his Olympic glory, looking young and fit. They've got the thought bubble is Howard Cosell. So I'm going to tell you the future, and you're not going to believe it. It's going to blow your mind.
That's all it says is I'm going to tell you the future and you're not going to believe it.
He's standing there, Cosell's standing with the microphone,
The
and
mic,
this, OJ and Bruce Jenner
Jenner.
standing there, and he goes, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to let you in on the future, and I'm going to blow your mind. I thought, what a perfect meme.
It didn't have to say anything more than that, right?
No.
It is a perfect meme. That's perfect.
Yeah. So that's a good caught my eye. Mine is vastly different, which is what happens here on Caught My Eye. I was scrolling through and I saw this in a couple of places, and so then I actually had pulled it up because a lot of people did it with just pure video because of just the novelty of it. But the headline is "Incredible Radio Flyer Wagon Car Goes on the Auction Block." So this couple in Alaska had built this. They had taken their old 1976 Mazda pickup truck, which was a single cab truck, and they built an exact replica around it of what looks like the old Radio Flyer or the Radio Flyer wagons that we knew as kids, complete not only with the red and the decals and the wheels, but also the huge handle that you would have to pull the wagon. And it's very drivable. It was owned by a couple, Fred Keller and Judy Foster of Alaska. He had a tool and machine shop, and he took this old, as I said, Mazda pickup that they had and made it into this Radio Flyer wagon car. And it's only about 2 inches longer than the original pickup truck. But he was able to modify it, and it's roadworthy. It passed all inspections. It's got a unique steering wheel. It's got a detail, which a lot of people picked up on, that looks like one of the 13-inch wagon wheels on the original wagons that we're all familiar with. And it's got the white wheels with the red cap on it. There's a horn on the dash. It's got lights. It's got everything that you would need to be a roadworthy vehicle. The current mileage is 58,000 miles. They drive it around. It's obviously it messes your hair up because it's open. It's like a wagon. So you're sitting in these 2 bucket seats and driving this wagon around. And it's fully road legal, as I said, and you can get it licensed. And it's going off. They decided that as they've gotten older, that they've decided to sell it and let somebody else have the joy of it. They said it's great when you're driving around. People are always looking at you, of course, and giving you the thumbs up. Not so sure they would take it on a long distance, but it could be trailered. You could take the 8-foot handle is removable if you needed to tow it or move it. And it's gone up for auction, I believe, this past weekend. I haven't seen what it sold for, but the starting price was $8,200.
That's it?
Yep. And they said whoever ends up with the vehicle will get full documentation, historical photographs of the build, and the original VIN number for the plate of the truck. So it was going up for auction in Alaska this past weekend.
Tim,
so if you've seen the picture of it, or if you're watching on our video cast here, you'll see the picture of the car.
It's pretty darn accurate to the wagon,
Yeah.
but my only question is the handle part,
Right.
which you said was removable if you want to tow it. Is it somehow? You might not know, but I wonder if it's somehow anchored so it doesn't fall forward.
Yes.
And cause,
It is.
okay.
It is anchored, and it could go down. And there's actually pictures of it as well where they're driving around where they've taken the handle off.
Okay.
Because if they wanted to get into a parking garage or something that had a lower, because it does stick up quite a bit, like 8 feet.
Well, because it's like to scale, so it's
Yeah.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would if you were going to parking garage, but they do take it off. But without it, it doesn't read wagon as well, I guess. But they did a remarkable job, I think, of making it.
I think so too.
There's a bunch of
Yeah.
other pictures, and of course, there's video. So if you want to just look it up on Google or search it, you could search Radio Flyer wagon car, and you'll be able to see it driving around. CNN had a field day with it; they loved it.
I do too. I think the attention to detail, like the little red caps on the wheels. I mean,
Yeah.
the scale is if you scaled this thing up and added an internal I don't even know how they had the engine configure it, but pretty well done.
When the decals are perfect. What was interesting about it, and I read a couple of different articles, nobody talked about whether there was any copyright infringement. Like, I would think if you're the company who makes the radio flyer, I'd buy this as a novelty. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I would have bought it.
It's
I
like
would buy
kind of
this.
the Oscar Mayer Wiener car, right?
Right. It's like LL Bean had the huge boot, the LL Bean boot in front of their store. If I were Radio Flyer, which I'm sure these are still made, probably not in the U.S. though, but
True.
or if I had a store that sold this sort of stuff, I think it'd be a fun novelty to get. But we'll see. We'll update everybody to see what it actually sold for. My guess is it probably sold for more than $8,200, but we'll see.
Oh, yeah, they always do conservative pricing for the first bid, so you're right. I bet it did go for more.
Right. So we'll see what happens there. So as moving right along here, Mr. Nash, we have our business birthday today.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
Frank Hornby is our birthday today. He was born May 15th, 1863, sort of.
Is this another one where you couldn't quite pin the date down?
Well, they have it written. So I looked in Wikipedia and I looked at a few different sources, and it's listed as May 15th, 1863. He died at 73 in 1936. The only disparity was they did say when some people have researched him further, they came across an old family Bible. And in the Bible, the mother had written notes within the Bible, and you list the people and family, whatever. And his mother had listed his birth date as May 2nd. But on his birth certificate and everything else, it says May 15th. So we're going with May 15th.
Okay.
Yeah. So, these things always happen. So he was an English inventor, businessman, and politician. He's known as a visionary in toy development and the manufacture of toys. Although he had no formal engineering training, he was responsible for the invention and production of 3 of the most popular lines of toys based on engineering principles in the 20th century. I've heard of only one of them. You are more knowledgeable in this area than me, so you probably know the others. But the 3 toy brands or 3 categories were the Meccano, the Hornby model railways, and Dinky toys.
Dinky's big.
Dinky's big. Those are the steel toys, bigger, probably the precursor to Hot Wheels, right?
Mm-hmm. And Matchbox,
And Matchbox. I'm sorry, Matchbox. And the Hornby Railroad was a scaled railroad line of similar to our Lionel, I believe, trains. And Meccano, which I'd never heard of, but is actually still made and marketed and sold, and currently
it's like an erector set, right?
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And
I think it's
ironically,
pronounced Meccano.
Oh, is it Meccano?
Is it Mechano?
It's Meccano.
Oh, so I think you're saying it right, but it's sort of like a ripoff of mechanical. So it's Meccano. Okay.
Well, and I was trying to figure out how to say it, and I did actually look, and I couldn't find anything that was, because I also couldn't understand where the name came from. Because it talked about how he developed the product. He was originally a bookkeeper. He was a cashier, bookkeeper, accountant, and he worked for a guy in Liverpool, England, that had he was a butcher, but he had a meat processing plant, and he did accounting there. And he had 3 sons, and in the evening he would tinker around and try to make toys for his kids. And so that's how this all came about. So he would do his bookkeeping during the day, and then he would go home, and he would tinker in his workshop with sheet metal and so forth, and came up with toys for his kids. And the first thing he came up with was this erector set, or the Meccano, or Mackinac, however we would say it. And he tried to sell it initially, and he did get a patent in 1901, but they said it was too rough. No one was really interested in mass producing this. They said because he would take old tin scraps and just cut them and put holes in them. And he initially didn't have any uniformity to it. And someone says you need to have interchangeable parts, and you need to have it uniform so that people can just have their own creativity and develop these things with nuts and bolts and so forth. And so that's what he actually did. He actually decided to standardize the pieces, and they would come in either 16 different parts and 12 different model kits. In his first year, in 1903, he sold 1,500 sets. and they were packed in these little tin boxes with an instruction manual in French and English. And each year he would get bigger and bigger. And as the toy became more popular, he ended up leaving the accounting business and just started making the toys full time. His business partner, who was also helped him, give him the first £5 to develop the business. If you can imagine, £5.
£5.
He did not peel off with him, but Hornby ended up doing such. He then from there had designed train sets and also the Dinky toys. And they said what was remarkable about all of this is he had no engineering training, but he was able to make these toys, very intricate toys, particularly with the metals and the dies, and particularly, as you know, with a train set, as to how difficult that would be. And so he ended up, toward his life, he was a millionaire by the 30s. He owned a huge mansion. He was driven to work in a limousine every day. And he ended up dying of diabetes. He ended up went into politics. He was a conservative member of Parliament, but died at 73 of heart condition and diabetes. And his legacy still lives on. He ended up selling, or the erector set, as you mentioned, which came out in 1913 in the United States. They ended up, Meccano bought the Erector brand, and they merged both companies in 1990.
Ah, okay.
And then in 2013, the Meccano brand was acquired by Canadian toy company Spin Master. And they still manufacture, they were manufactured up until 2023. In October, they closed the factory in France, Calais. And but the toys are still designed and marketed and sold in the U.S. and Canada. So he had quite a legacy and made quite a bit of money from somebody who just kind of fell into it for making toys for their kids.
I think it's great. And you know, here in the United States, I think the big trains were American Flyer and Lionel, the big gauge stuff, and of course. Later on, it was HO, N gauge, the miniature stuff. And my erector set was made by Gilbert. I think it was Gilbert.
Okay.
I had a Gilbert Chemcraft microscope and a Gilbert erector set. But that was the beauty of the erector set. It was basically just parts. It was girders and bolts and nuts, and maybe you got a little winch motor that ran on batteries or something. And
they said in later years they added plastics.
They did, yeah.
Things. Yeah.
I remember when I used to be I was allowed to order extra parts for my erector set. I would wait every day for the UPS truck to drive up with those parts.
Oh,
my
God.
mom's like, what are you doing? I'm waiting for my parts.
So they said that it looks like the name, although I can't see how they could have developed the name from it, but his working name initially for the toy, the Meccano, was Mechanics Made Easy Sets. They were sold under Mechanics Made Easy, and then they changed the name in 1903 to the MECC.
I would go with Meccano. I bet that's
Meccano.
Meccano.
Because
it's mechanics, mechanical, Meccano.
Meccano. So anyway, I was surprised they're still for sale.
The sets and that Spin Master bought it's pretty cool, huh? And especially given if it's what we had as kids, nuts and bolts and little screws and like what we would call a swallowing problem, it's a small part, it could be swallowed by a child.
He said in 1934 is when the Dinky toys came out, the trucks and the cars. They were die-cast miniature model cars and trucks. They were initially introduced under the Hornby name in 1931, but changed to Dinky toys in 1934. And then his model train systems, which were 00 gauge, introduced in 1938. And he also had a clockwork train and also had a clock that you could build as a kid. Bob would have loved that.
Yes. In fact, I bet
that was 1915. It doesn't look like that lasted very long.
When he hears this, he's going to look for that one.
A little older than us. So so happy birthday to
good business birthday
to Frank Hornby. I had trouble finding one. There was I had trouble finding a birthday today. I don't know why, but I thought this toy one was interesting, and I didn't know a lot about the toys. So So moving right along here, Mr. Nash had found a great article about something called the Google effect. And I didn't initially know what that meant or what it was. And then as I read the story, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm guessing you probably do too. So the headline for this article was 3 simple steps to fight the Google effect and improve your memory recall. And the article opened up with a woman that talked about how she's made this lemon bar recipe many, many times. But every time she goes to make it, she has to look it up because she's forgot how to make it. And I've done that recently where there's a chicken dish that I got out of the New York Times. And it's not very hard. And most people would probably make it 2 or 3 times and then just have it in their minds to just whip it up quick. I still have to look it up. And that apparently is what I have here is digital amnesia or the Google effect because I know that it's available there and I don't have to remember it and I can look it up. And so I was wondering if you agreed or did not agree with this Google effect or the digital amnesia.
This is, okay, like I'm going to thread in another. Years ago, Tim and I interviewed a really wonderful guest and author named Charles Duhigg, and he wrote a book called The Power of Habit.
Right.
Why we do what we do in life and business. And one of the interesting things that comes out of that book is we learn early on that our short-term memories are designed to hold things, small things, for a limited amount of time. And if your brain knows that you can find the answer to something or that you have, it automatically moves that off short-term memory. It might not even put it in long-term memory. It just might put a marker there saying, like what Tim was saying, if I'm going to make this chicken dish, oh, I know how to find the recipe for that. And that's the only thing you need to remember. So I remember that. And then when I saw this, I thought, my God, this makes it even worse because like we do things like Bob and I will be watching TV and I'll say, was this actress in something else? And in the past, it was always a sign that you were like a good memory person when it came to movies and TV shows, if you could name something. But we immediately go to IMDb or Wikipedia to find out, and you find the answer. But what you're not doing then is you're not using your long-term recall. And you might actually have the knowledge in your head, but since you're not using it, it's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. And I find that with a lot of things. Like, I took animation classes back in 2016 and 2017, and I remember a lot of it. Only when I read my handwritten notes and only when I look at things again. And then I think if I have to go back if I wanted to animate something today, I'd have to sort of redo things to get the muscle memory back. So they have a couple of examples here of things you can do to improve your memory and short circuit the Google effect by doing the following things. And the first one was pause before reaching for your phone or I'm going to put in your iPad or your laptop. Just because you can't immediately recall something doesn't mean you'll never recall it. Before Googling a question you've searched before, the author of this piece recommends taking a few minutes to try to remember the answer. And this came to us from CNBC.com. Even if this doesn't work at first and you end up having to Google it anyway, you will slowly strengthen your memory pathways and improve your recall. The only thing I thought of when I thought of this was I used to remember 6 to 7 phone numbers by heart. I couldn't do that today if you paid me.
Well, I was just going to, it's funny you said that because I wrote in the margin here, no one remembers phone numbers anymore.
Yeah.
And I thought I can still tell you my phone number from when I was in kindergarten and we lived in Stamford, Connecticut. I still can remember that number. I have your number memorized because you've had your cell phone for so long, your cell phone number. And I have Brian, my friend Brian's memorized. But I've said this many times. I'd be in a world of hurt if I lost my phone because I need to either write down people's numbers or catalog them somewhere. I actually have done screen grabs of lists of contacts that I have on my computer. But yeah, if you forgot your phone and you were in an emergency and somebody said, "Oh, you need to call so and so," I don't know what I would do. I don't know my mother's cell phone number. I know her landline, which she still has, but I don't have her cell phone number memorized. And so I'd probably end up calling you or calling Brian.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have your numbers to say, "Can you please look up such and such and such and such for me?" But no, the phone number thing's a big one because we used to remember. You remember all your friends' phone numbers, remember?
Yeah, and your work number, and you could just recall it because we used it all the time. I guess that's the thing.
So number 2 was write down what you want to remember. Going back to phone numbers, that if
Taking
you find
notes too, yeah.
right, if you find information online that you'll want to remember, write it down. You say that all the time. You've said that all the time, John, to write down things that you want to remember. It says taking notes by hand tends to help retain information better, and also means you have to engage more actively in what you're doing. And they said that this is an expert-approved strategy. In 2021, Bill Gates said that he takes handwritten notes while reading books in order to help him absorb the information. For a lot of books, that's the key to my learning, he said.
I love that quote that he gave, because you know something? I was working on a research project recently, and I found all this. I have all the web pages bookmarked. I can go to them anytime I want. But the only parts of those articles that I remember reading are the ones I wrote down, and it's the mechanism of writing. And I don't know, Tim, how your handwriting is these days, but mine is degraded a great deal.
Oh yeah.
So if I make an effort to write handwritten notes, I actually spend 10 minutes with a piece of paper and my pen. I've done this, I swear to God. I write the alphabet out, lowercase, uppercase, lowercase, uppercase. Then I write rows of numbers, and then I start taking notes. And after a while, my handwriting kind of falls into what my handwritings look like since college, basically, because I think somewhere between grammar school and high school or middle school, we merged cursive and printed. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Well, you print little.
I'm a small handwriter. Yeah.
You're a small handwriter. Do you when you send a note to somebody like that, a handwritten note, do you do cursive or it's a combo?
Combo, and I write the note on a piece of paper first, and then I write it on the card or the letter. Yeah.
Because I've told you, I used to always do it. If I know it's somebody that's of our age or older, I'll still do cursive. But I told you the story where I had I'd written a very nice note to a friend of ours, son who graduated college, and he opened it up and just stared at it. And his mother and father, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And then she goes, "Oh, he can't read this." And I was like, "What?" So she had to read the card down. So who can't read cursive? I can go back and read. We didn't write the way they did the Declaration of Independence, where the S's look like F's, but you and I could still read it.
We can still.
How could you not read cursive? If I was starting school again in education, I'd go all the way back to the basics. I'd teach kids cursive again, wouldn't you?
And well, yes, because there's something we now know from science that the art of handwriting, it slows your thinking down. You have to think about what you're writing. It's an act of muscle memory, the whole bit. It actually reinforces what you're learning. So yeah, I would teach it. And
the times tables, right?
I found I have a whole bunch of letters that we used to write letters to each other in college because having the phone was expensive.
Phones were too expensive.
And I have a whole bunch of the letters so from freshman year to senior, your handwriting changed over time. So freshman year, it was cursive. And by the time you were in junior year, it was a combo, completely legible. I mean, you could read everything perfectly. But it was that when we learned how to write a little faster, you didn't want to, cursive could take a little time, whereas hand, so we kind of changed things. But I believe in handwriting and all that. And I love that Bill Gates actually did that he takes the time to do that. The last one they have here, when he's reading a book and he wants to remember it, this last one says, reframe your thinking. The next time you find a new recipe you like or learn about something new that you know you don't want to forget, act as if you won't be able to look it up the next time. This mindset shift can help you commit things to memory. It is important to use technology as an assistive tool, Borges says, but stresses that that's important to keep our brains and minds engaged, active, and recalling things. This practice of challenging your brain to keep it in good shape extends beyond the search box. If we are over-reliant on a calculator to help us with even basic math, we might forget the times tables, Mr. Bennett, we learned when we were younger. Now, I'll leave it at that because reframing your thinking is a great way of putting that. So prior to committing something to a technological solution, think about it. Do I want to memorize this? Like a couple of recipes I now know, hands down, I don't even need to look at the recipe. Like you were saying before, because I've thought I don't want to bother looking it up again. So,
yeah, and on some of the recipes, I've taken a screen grab or I've taken and I put them out on a Word doc and then printed it. But that's not the same as actually writing it down, I guess.
My mom handed me a recipe on paper that looked like it was going to disintegrate. It was her recipe for boeuf bourguignon. And her handwriting looks like my older sister's. Gorgeous cursive. You could read it perfectly. And I'm looking at this thing thinking, this has been something she's pulled out of her recipe book. She knew she had it written down. She pulled it out. She wrote it down. She didn't really have to look at it. She kind of knew how to do it based because she's done it before. She said, "Here, honey, take this." And I said, "No, I can find it online." No, this is my recipe.
Doesn't it take like 2 days to make that?
Yes,
Doesn't it take 2 days?
it's kind of like making a pot roast or something. You got to like really let it cook and
Have you done the recipe?
No, I have my own little beef stew recipe, and it's not. And actually, I made beef stew for my mom recently and brought it up to her, and so she had a couple meals. Loved it. Is this my recipe? Kinda. Well, it tastes like my recipe.
You should just say yes.
Yes. It's not boeuf bourguignon. Oh, I know it's not boeuf bourguignon, but this is very good. This is a very good beef stew. This is my recipe. I'm like, okay, it's your recipe.
Of course it is.
Yeah, so the Google effect can be interrupted by those three things we went through, and you can learn to kind of make your memory better by pausing before you reach for your phone, write things down that you want to remember, as Bill Gates does when he reads a book, and to reframe your thinking around what you're doing. So maybe you don't need the computer. Instead, you train yourself to do the handwriting or to do other ways of memorizing that application or whatever you want to do.
Perfect.
So there you go, Mr. Bennett. It's been a very fun-filled show. We went from Abba to Liberace and Little Richard to a red flyer wagon to model trains and dinky toys. Isn't that the focus group, though?
There's an awful. It's a lot in 40 minutes, or whatever our time is. I don't know, 40 minutes. Yeah,
40, 45. You get a lot of. It's,
lot
as my
packed in
mother's
there.
husband says, it's business, marketing, and a lot of nonsense in between.
Maybe not a lot. Some.
I don't know about the word nonsense too. I cry foul with that, but
You know what? If you listen to our show, here's what I think. If you've listened to our show, particularly over the 16 years, we give a lot of clues that'll help you on Jeopardy.
Tim, one of these days I want to do the online Jeopardy test. I bet I'll be rejected flat out, but because of timing, I don't know how. I just thought it would be fun to take it. It's online now. You used to have to go.
I had two friends that took the test. One of them, Mary Treisbach from Subaru. She was the director of marketing. She was on the show, and she said the biggest challenge for her. She did great. She took the pre-test, and then she went up to New York City and did a sit and interview and so forth. And she said the most difficult part. So she made it through. She won one day, and then the next day, I don't think she lost, but it was Baby Ruth was the answer, or the candy bar or something about the president's candy bar, which she knew. But she said the biggest struggle with the show is the button.
I've heard this. And
from people. She said because a lot of people can read forward, when the category comes up or the question, you can read fast and hit the button. That's why you have the tick, 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 because the button doesn't engage until after he finishes reading or she finishes reading, the host. And so that's why you constantly hear tick, 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 tick. So she said that was the most difficult part. She knew a lot of answers. She just didn't click in time.
Well, no, or she was clicking. It just someone else registered.
She didn't get it right.
I heard her.
And then my other friend did excellent, just like us on the SATs. She did excellent on all but one category or two categories, and so she didn't get picked. The Bible and religion, she didn't do well in, but everything else she did great. But she goes, I bombed the Bible and religion, and she did not get picked. But I laughed. But it would be a fun test to take, I think. I sit and watch it all the time, and I can, I'm not. I think if I thought about some of the answers, I'd get them, but I'm not as quick as some of the people on the show.
Oh, well, when you train to go on Jeopardy, I think I've read a couple articles. Some contestants do flashcards.
Yeah.
They'll sit and they'll do like history. They'll do and they do it to a point where they're learning how to just trust themselves that they have the answer. That's the other thing, is you don't second guess yourself. Often I remember it was Alex Trebek when he was alive used to say, your first answer is probably the right one, and if you start second guessing, you're going to start wondering about it.
And it's funny because I've done that way where I'll hear something and I'll immediately say it and I'll be like, oh, that's not it, and I'll say something else and it was it.
And it
It's
was
what
it. Yeah.
it's you got to go with what hits you first.
Go with your gut, folks.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you for joining us here on the Focus Group. FocusGroupRadio.com is our website. You can learn about us there, including our partners. Deep Discount. You can visit Deep Discount by getting to our site, FocusGroupRadio.com. Click on the Deep Discount logo and start shopping away. They have great prices on everything, and they have everything. Like, it's not just movies and TV shows. It's records and toys and turntables. Remember turntables? And we want to remind people, and we always say this here on the Focus Group, don't text and drive, please. We want you to arrive alive. Yesterday at Tim, I was driving by a Chevy Tahoe. You know, those cars are enormous, right?
Enormous, yeah.
The thing was drifting off towards the rumble strip. When I finally passed, the guy was looking down at his phone. He had his hand on the steering wheel looking, and we all know you can't do these two things at the same time. It's bullying.
Did you blow your horn at him?
No,
I usually blow the horn and give him the finger, but then, I'll be shot one day. I'm going to be shot.
I'm not sure that schooling anybody that way is ever going to change their behaviors. I just hope the guy makes it home okay every day. Anyway, have a great week, folks, and we'll see you in the new one.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.